Schaupalast in einer Loge sitzen wir. Unten bietet sich unseren Augen.
The radio reporter didn't need to feign respect. He was himself a trusting disciple of his Führer. The reporter created a myth and then fell for it. When the unemployed Dr. Joseph Goebbels found his cult figure, he felt called by God. This man was his Messiah.
Diary entry, November 6th, 1925. And those big blue eyes like stars. He is pleased to see me. I am filled with happiness. He is there. He shakes my hand. Then he talks for half an hour with wit, irony, humor, sarcasm, earnestness, fire, passion. This man has all the qualities of a king, the born champion of the people, the future dictator.
The longing for a strong man. The yearning for strong words.
Die engsten Mitarbeiter des Führers schauen auf ihn und finden in seinem Gesicht Kraft und Stärke und Zuversicht.
Ein Mann von wahrhaft säkularer Größe.
A man of such stature needs someone who will beat the drum for him and follow him blindly. In November 1926, Hitler had sent the failed writer into the lion's den, to Red Berlin, where the National Socialist Party was languishing. Gauleiter Goebbels was given the job of seizing power. The parvenu from right in the Rhineland saw the chance of a lifetime. He set to work with ambition, agility, and total lack of scruple. He wanted one thing above all: to be noticed.
His demeanor was that of a champion of the people. He had a gaunt, rather small body, a disproportionately large head, and an incredible mouth. A mouth that cut his face in two.
He insisted on his own newspaper, Der Angriff, the assault.
The Angriff of those days was dreadful, really dreadful. The lies they told. But the people, or some of the people, believed it. And it's how Goebbels attracted a large part of the lower middle classes, and even some of the so-called proletariat. Goebbels knew that to conquer the streets, he would have to use terror.
Headlines and gangs of thugs, threats and enticements, agitation and violence.
I asked myself, who was Goebbels? A journalist who had never found the right job? An author whose books had been rejected? And I wondered, as a journalist, if it had often happened that an unsuccessful journalist or an unsuccessful author had stood somewhere and burned the books of rivals. It was a triumph for the little doctor. He wanted to arouse hate. I think he believed in hate. Even in his private life, Goebbels didn't like people.
He particularly hated Jews. Now he was in power, he made them suffer. They became the scapegoats for his years of failure.
10 Uhr hat der Boykott begonnen. Vollzieht sich mit einer schlagartigen Wucht, aber auch mit einer imponierenden Manneszucht.
Goebbels' use of violence against Jewish shops. It was a foretaste of what was in store for people when racial lunacy became law. The Germans were shown the regime in brilliant color. Goebbels had the seizure of power reenacted for the cinema. A facade.
Darum freut es mich heute, mit Ihnen zusammen nach altem Brauch das Richtfest feiern zu können.
His new propaganda ministry. Headquarters of brainwashing and mass seduction. From here, he launched a propaganda campaign without equal, which overran the whole country. The technology was new. The message was barbaric. Thought control.
Das ist das Geheimnis der Propaganda. Den die Propaganda erfassen will, ganz mit den Ideen der Propaganda zu durchdringen, ohne dass er überhaupt merkt. Selbstverständlich hat die Propaganda eine Absicht, aber die Absicht muss so klug und so virtuos kaschiert sein, dass der von dieser Absicht erfüllt werden soll, das überhaupt nicht bemerkt.
Here, the controller of the press brought his agents into line, and they obeyed to the letter.
I felt relatively free. I always thought I could write what I wanted. But strangely enough, years later, when I read articles which I had written then, I was surprised at the inhibited style in which they were written, as if my brain had been standing at attention, awaiting orders.
Pictures, in fact, were the most effective tool. Kilometers of film. These are Goebbels' real legacy. Pictures intended to spellbind. Columns of people. German Brotherhood. Cult. Order in a chaotic world. That was the fatal promise of pictures such as these. A high office for the high priest. Now as much enthralled to his own cult as its creator. The Third Reich as a continuous national holiday. The spectacle, the setting, the master of ceremonies among his followers. The opinion maker kept a watchful eye on the mood of the people, his idea of a public opinion survey. Pressing the flesh went with the job.
So. Und das freut einen, dass so viele mit dem goldenen Parteiabzeichen dabei sind. Und die Landarbeiter, ja. Wie viele Kinder haben Sie? 12. Da muss ich mich ja genieren. Wie viele haben Sie? 3, das ist ja gar nichts.
No need for the minister to be embarrassed about the size of his family. He had dutifully fulfilled his quota. A family idyll, just like an advertisement. The little Rhinelander had come a long way, and he wanted everyone to see it. The Third Reich's model family. His wife Magda came from a good family. She was a good catch and a loyal party member. A couple entirely to Hitler's taste. What a model husband. With this woman at his side, he played the man of the world, who enjoyed basking in power. Status symbols of the 30s. Among other things, a yacht. Even he said it was a little expensive. The bon viveur liked traveling to Italy. In the country of the Duce, his shining example, he represented Hitler's Reich. He would have liked to be foreign minister. Back home, he accepted a country estate from the city of Berlin. The Universal Film Studios paid for the renovations. It was nothing corrupt, just a token of respect. The family home next door. A home without a father. His duty to the fatherland took precedence. Still, to the outside world, the picture of domestic bliss.
He adored the children, and they him. He played with them. I was very impressed. I had never seen a father play so delightfully. Theirs was an exemplary family life.
But the model husband was often away from home, chasing skirt. It was typical of Goebbels to find highfalutin words for it.
Keine Moralinprediger, sondern wir sind offene Renaissance-Menschen und wollen das auch in der öffentlichen Meinung zum Ausdruck bringen.
He did just that unabashedly as the head of German film. He exploited his position shamelessly, using starlets to boost his own ego. He was an adept of the casting couch. It was always the same story.
And then he said that he enjoyed being able to relax and that I was charming company. I wasn't trying to please him. I was probably far too scared. He said that he liked to go for a drive in the evening and asked if I'd accompany him. We drove all over town and then on the Autobahn. And then there was a fence and a little wood. The gate opened and we drove in. There was a small bungalow on a slight rise above a lake. And someone opened the door. He lit the fire, or someone did. I was offered a drink and a seat, and we talked and talked. And then he made advances. I thought it was absolutely outrageous and shocking. I was no longer interested in my career, that's for sure. He promised me I'd be a star. I reacted so hysterically that he gave up. You will never have a career this way, that's what he told me. That was on Friday. On Sunday night, or maybe it was Monday, before we left for the studios to carry on with the film, we were told that the film had been cancelled.
Anyone who opposed him was finished. A bone marrow disease in his childhood had crippled his right foot. He was excluded from the ranks of the able-bodied, yet hated nothing more than imperfection.
His childhood physical disability had led to certain character deficiencies. One of those was a thirst for revenge, a desire to retaliate. He didn't forget. He bore lifelong grudges. In short, he had developed negative characteristics, which I attribute to his childhood experiences. His relationships with women were undoubtedly and very strongly influenced by these experiences. They had an inhibiting effect on his character.
A fling with this woman developed into a full-blown affair with far-reaching consequences. In a film à clé, Goebbels asked the Reich for understanding. Playing the lead, his darling.
I suppose I loved his love. He loved me so much that I fell prey to this love. And unfortunately, he told his wife. And the following day she went to Hitler and told him the opposite of how it really was. She said I had wormed my way into their marriage, and she told lies. Hitler sent for Goebbels and made him promise that he would end our relationship.
Ich fürchte, man sieht uns am Hofe nicht allzu gern.
Wie kommst du darauf? Nein, ewig bestimmt nicht. Ich werde in den nächsten Tagen mit meinem Vater sprechen.
Und der Hitler hat am Obersalzberg.
And Hitler called everybody to the Obersalzberg. Magda Goebbels wanted a divorce. Goebbels wanted to resign and go to Japan as consul. He said, and I don't care if I have to sell neckties in Japan, I want to resign. Then Hitler made a terrible scene. He ranted and raved. He needed Goebbels. He couldn't accept his resignation, and he made such a scene, and then finally said, okay, try to live together for 3 months. If after those 3 months you tell me that you can't live together, then I'll give you the divorce. Of course, he didn't really mean it. He was merely playing for time.
Es fällt mir wirklich schwer, ewig. 8 lange Wochen.
Die Zeit wird Ihnen schneller vergehen, als Sie denken.
This time Goebbels met with a frosty reception at the Berghof. To Hitler, the scandal was an embarrassment. An affair with a Czech at the time of the Sudetenland crisis was simply out of the question. Alarmed, the lover bowed to his master's orders. He valued his goodwill more than the love of any woman.
In an icy tone, Hitler ordered Goebbels to send Frau Barova back to Prague within 48 hours. She was Czech. And that's what happened. And from that moment on, to the delight of his enemies, Ribbentrop and so on, Goebbels was out of favor.
He was very depressed that he was no longer invited to meals in the Chancellery, and that he was being passed over by the Führer. I saw then how he depended on this contact, like an alcoholic who needs a drink. He was desperate for a nip from the bottle. He was longing for the Führer to recharge him with energy.
His chance came unexpectedly in November 1938. On the streets of Munich, The old fighters were commemorating Hitler's failed putsch when the news came in that a German diplomat had been shot in Paris by a Jew.
Now Goebbels spied an opportunity to draw attention to himself and make an impression on the Führer. He alerted his Berlin stormtroopers. They knew him and his methods well, because he had used them to take control of Berlin. He ordered them out on the street. He wanted to show that he was tireless and totally committed, and hounded them and the plebs, the mob, onto the Jews and the Jewish shops.
November 10th, 1938. I went to the party reception at the old town hall, a huge gathering. I explained the situation to the Führer. He decided to let the demonstration continue and withdraw the police, so the Jews would feel the people's anger. The right decision. I gave the relevant orders to the police and the party. Then I spoke briefly to the party leaders. Thunderous applause. Everyone rushed straight to the telephones. Now the people would act. I was about to return to my hotel when I saw the sky was blood red. The synagogue was on fire. We had it doused only where it threatened other buildings. Apart from that, we let it burn. As I drove back to the hotel, the window panes were rattling. Bravo, bravo.
Stage-managed public rage. He had a knack for it. With this barbaric action, he marked himself as the most radical Jew-hater.
I think that both Hitler and Goebbels were convinced that there was a Jewish conspiracy in the world. The Jews were part of the population which had to be exterminated. I think that was clear from the start. He explicitly stated that war would be declared on the Jews and that they would be wrong not to take it seriously. There was a Goebbels speech in which he said the Jewish press he was head of is making us look ridiculous. And I tell you, he said, the day will come when the smile will be wiped off Jewish faces. Was that already the plan for Buchenwald and Auschwitz? I'm not sure.
Sie sollen sich hüten. Einmal wird unsere Geduld zu Ende sein und dann wird den Juden das freche Lügenmaul gestopft werden.
An agitator like that was indispensable to the head of state. Hitler also needed him to beat the drum for war, but he kept his plans for invasion from his henchmen. While Hitler's Wehrmacht overran Poland, Goebbels delivered the musical accompaniment, a war of words.
So ist es, wenn die deutsche Luftwaffe zuschlägt. Sie wird auch den Schuldigsten der Schuldigen zu treffen wissen.
The innocent were the first to be hit. The armchair warrior Goebbels was impressed that they were getting down to business, without regard for reputation or international opinion. On a trip to Poland, he looked for validation of his racial hatred.
November 2nd, 1939. A trip through the ghetto. We got out and inspected everything closely. It's indescribable. They aren't humans, they're animals. This is therefore not a humanitarian task, but a surgical one. One must make incisions here, quite radical ones.
At the end of 1939 or in 1940, the newsreels showed pictures of Poles with Jewish faces. When the lights came up after one of these films, he said he didn't know what would happen if those Jews returned, if we lost the war. It was unthinkable. My wife and I talked about it occasionally. We said we'd kill ourselves if that happened. He abused them. Look at them, he said. They've got the faces of criminals. And so on, in a really strange, excited manner.
Pictures of the enemy. And these are the heroes. Uncle Rommel with the family. A modern general, a careerist like Goebbels himself. Goebbels was the first to make an idol of Rommel. Victories are the best propaganda. In their wake, Goebbels' skepticism about a war on two fronts faded. His steadfast belief in Hitler's genius banished all his doubts. The civilian with no military service played the commander. He wanted to be more soldierly than his soldiers. In the Second World War, he tried to make up for everything that had been denied him in the First. His great moment came in June 1941. This time, he was informed. This time, he had an anthem at the ready. This time, he was allowed to declare war, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Hitler claimed that Moscow was plotting with Britain against Germany. A war of annihilation masquerading as a fight for freedom. Goebbels was in his element. He sold the Angriff, the war of assault, as a preventive measure. Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Die entschlossene Tat des Führers ist dem alles vernichtenden Mongolensturm zuvorgekommen.
This hate campaign revealed the true face of Dr. Goebbels, a complex-ridden Herrenmensch on the rampage.
Während der Nationalsozialismus eine neue Fassung und Formung der europäischen Kultur in die Wege leitet, ist der Bolschewismus die Kampfansage des von Juden geführten internationalen Untermenschentums gegen die Kultur an sich.
This man murders with words. Tour of inspection at a prisoner of war camp. Even in the face of suffering, compassion is foreign to him. In the shadow of war, he pushes on as the plan to murder the Jews is executed.
August 20th, 1941. I'm starting to become active in the Jewish question. As the Führer has allowed me to introduce an insignia for the Jews, I think I shall be able to carry out the necessary reforms very quickly and without legal documentation. If this badge is worn by every Jew, very soon they won't dare show their faces in our town centers. They'll be pushed out of sight.
Of course, I held my head high and with pride. Look at me. This is what a Jew looks like. It was quite a strain. Naturally, there were people who looked at me with hatred. But there were also others who gave me kind looks, and still others who, on crowded trains and subways, gave me things which Jews couldn't buy. So it was really a dreadful label. The same thing happened to the Jews in the Middle Ages. I think it had a lot to do with Goebbels' own disability. He attracted attention too.
Es wäre ja sehr unklug gewesen, wenn wir vor der Machtübernahme schon den Juden ganz genau auseinandergesetzt hätten, was wir mit ihnen zu tun beabsichtigten. Das war ganz gut. Es war ganz gut und zweckmäßig, dass wenigstens ein Teil der Juden dachte, na ganz so schlimm wird's ja nicht kommen, die reden viel, aber das wird sich ja noch finden, was sie tun werden.
Goebbels knew only too well where the Jews' journey would end. He had been initiated into Hitler's plans and approved of them.
March 27, 1942. The Jews are being deported to the east from our territory in Poland. I will not describe here the barbaric procedure which is used. Very little is left of the Jews afterwards. Roughly speaking, one can say that 60% of them must be liquidated, and only 40% can be used for work. The Jews are receiving their punishment. It may be barbaric, but they fully deserve it.
I don't actually know if he intended to make Jews second-class citizens. He just wanted to crush them with his words.
The further the tide of war turned, the more words replaced the declining impact of weapons. After Stalingrad, the new catchphrase was readiness to make sacrifices. Now the message was in every respect total.
Das Judentum stellt eine infektiöse Erscheinung dar, die ansteckend wirkt. Deutschland jedenfalls hat nicht die Absicht, sich dieser jüdischen Bedrohung zu beugen, sondern vielmehr die, ihr rechtzeitig, wenn nötig, unter vollkommener und radikalster Ausschaltung des Judentums entgegenzutreten.
Extermination of the Jews. He almost let the truth slip out. Goebbels in the Sports Palace. He wanted public approval for a total war on the home front as well. The pinnacle of his speeches, painstakingly rehearsed. How to bring a people to the point of madness.
Redner behaupten, das deutsche Volk wehrt sich gegen die totalen Kriegsmaßnahmen der Regierung. Es will nicht den totalen Krieg, sagen die Engländer, sondern die Kapitulation.
By then, he had really stirred up his audience with tales of woe to innocent women and children, and to German institutions and bombs over the fatherland. All that naturally whipped up the fury of his audience. And when he asked his questions and everyone began shouting, it all got out of hand. We were horrified to see how it was possible to make the packed sports palace go crazy with the question, do you want total war? Yes, yes, or the shouting. It was a terrible experience. We stood as if paralyzed. Someone who was there with us said, applaud, you have to applaud.
What total war meant, people soon found out. No one could escape the call. The firestorm had long since returned to where it had first been ignited. Germany's towns were dying. He was flourishing. He thrived on crises. The firebrand knew how to bolster flagging spirits. With no victories to offer, he urged patience and perseverance. At least he dared to show his face on the streets, unlike Hitler. Publicly, Goebbels raised hopes of a miracle. Privately, he doubted if the war could still be won. It wasn't total enough for him. The commander-in-chief still disregarded the plans of his amateur strategist.
Goebbels' influence was minimal. I've seen 100 times how this man flew to the Führer's headquarters with big plans and returned with his tail between his legs. He always confessed that he could never recover from these experiences. I think his role has been greatly overestimated.
His role changed rapidly after the attempted assassination of Hitler. Goebbels was ruthless in crushing the coup in Berlin. The devoted servant was now back in favor with his master, total favor. As general plenipotentiary for the mobilization of total war, Goebbels had his men comb Germany to find yet more people to send to the war. He managed just before the end. The last call up to save a murderous Reich. Old men, boys. Now, at last, he could be a soldier too, but the arsenal was empty. Instead of wonderful weapons, desperate lies.
Jene Divisionen, die jetzt schon zu kleinen Offensiven angetreten sind und in den nächsten Wochen und Monaten zu Großoffensiven antreten werden, werden in diesen Kampf hineingehen wie in einen Gottesdienst. Und ein Schrei der Rache wird aus ihren Kehlen emporsteigen, vor dem der Feind erblassen wird.
I always came away slightly more convinced that we were fighting a war which we could win. I felt more confident. He said the same things we heard before, either in the Hitler Youth or at other meetings. He confirmed everything, and because he said it, it had to be true. In that respect, we were all rather naive.
Words of encouragement to the end. A visit to the front in Lubania.
We were expecting a Goebbels performance, and the really interesting thing is that this man was clever enough not to use the words final victory.
The lie used the truth to appear credible.
He dared to come here and say, you must make sacrifices. It all depends on you. I can't guarantee or promise anything.
This madness seduced, above all, those who had never known anything else. Their trust was abused.
Dieses Deutschland ist überhaupt nicht niederzubrechen oder niederzuwerfen. Nicht nur seine Männer, auch seine Frauen, ja seine Kinder sind Helden.
At the end, he was still urging kids to fight and to die. He was a brute of a man. He shares the guilt. If he hadn't been such a good propagandist and hadn't brainwashed people, some of them might have been more critical. He drew a terrible picture of life. If we lost the war, we would become slaves or be exterminated. We'd work for the Russians, Americans, or British. We wouldn't have the right to exist. We had to defend ourselves. That's how they kept people towing the line.
Total ruin. And he prolonged it with words.
Eher würden wir uns die Hände blutig arbeiten und würden wir bis zum letzten Atemzug kämpfen, ehe dass wir zuließen, dass der Feind das deutsche Land besetzte und uns seinen Willen aufzwängte.
Damit ist Berlin zur Frontstadt geworden. An den Mauern unserer Stadt wird und muss der Mongolensturm gebrochen werden. Provokateure oder aufsässige Ausländer sind sofort festzunehmen oder besser noch unschädlich zu machen. Ich bleibe mit meinen Mitarbeitern selbstverständlich in Berlin. Auch meine Frau und meine Kinder sind hier und bleiben hier.
Hatte vielleicht 5 Minuten gesprochen.
He had been speaking for about 5 minutes when a shell landed in the garden of the house. The explosion was so strong that all of the windows in my room broke and splintered over the desk. Bits of the wall went flying. I saw him take his manuscript and continue reading, using his right hand to brush away the dust, glass and mortar. He wasn't at all distracted.
While Stalin's soldiers were already in the heart of Berlin, in Hitler's bunker, Goebbels was closer to his master than ever. And he was desperate to follow him to the grave.
Goebbels suddenly came in, and I was shocked at how he looked. He was deathly pale, and he had tears in his eyes. And he came up to me, and there seemed to be no one else he could talk to. Anyway, he said, "The Führer wants me to leave him. He wants me to stay in Berlin and take a position in the future government. I can't do that." I mean, he was in utter despair because he thought he was Hitler's truest follower, and that there was no better proof of his loyalty than to die with him.
That led to murder. From the idyll at home, Goebbels had his children brought to the bunker.
There were dramatic scenes in the bunker where we heard the children were staying. Women, kitchen staff, and office staff came to plead with Frau Goebbels to spare the children. Then the day came when Frau Goebbels got the children ready to die. They were dressed in white, and their hair was combed. Then they went away.